Hey, this is Chaplain Rich with Chaplain Barbara with the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy. So today we just want to have some conversation, and today we're talking about spiritual inclusivity. But it'll be just that. It'll be conversation. It'll be evolving thoughts. We don't claim to have the perfect thought or opinion or authoritative doctrine on anything. We just want to have a conversation about what spiritual inclusivity is, and not just from our faith tradition, but for the people of diverse faith traditions that follow us. I know certainly in my faith tradition, being Christian, um, here we are 2023 years later, and we've all been having different interpretations on what absolute truth is. And I certainly am not arrogant enough to think that my individual interpretation of absolute truth is the only one. I think there is a lot of diversity, and we've experienced that not just in Christianity, but in world religions. And for us as chaplains, we're out in the field ministering to people in all those diverse places. So, a dear friend and fellow chaplain, Barbara, uh, is always talking about holding space for people. So today we want to talk about what that looks like with spiritual inclusivity. But first, Barbara, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just a little introduction. What drew you into chaplaincy? What kind of chaplaincy are you doing? And maybe just talk about what's very dear to your heart. How does God specifically pour through you in chaplaincy?
Thank you, Rich, and thanks for the opportunity to be here in this conversation. While you were talking, I glanced at a piece of my prep notes. And one of the things I have highlighted is the supreme religious challenge is to see God in the one who is not in our image, which I think
Mm,
is what you were saying. So yes, to start, I think it's important that we always claim our own spiritual tradition so that we help people understand where we're coming from. Um, but I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm a cradle Episcopalian. I was baptized and married at Grace Church, and I actually live in Atlanta, Georgia, but my parents and lots of my extended family is still in the Low Country. So we're back and forth. We're there about a week a month, and I've just been so privileged to serve with Coastal Crisis, maybe a day or two. It used to be more. During COVID, we were there for a longer stretches. I could offer more time, but so I'm a volunteer crisis chaplain with Coastal Crisis, and in Atlanta, I serve as a hospital chaplain. Within the Emory system, in a Catholic hospital within the Emory system. Um, I felt called one day in Bible study. It was like a burning bush kind of moment. I talked to my priest. She said, "Have you ever thought about going to seminary?" I was like, "No." um, so at age 47, with a fourth grader and a 10th grader, I began my work on a Master of Divinity degree. And it was in seminary that I was able to discern a call more into the nooks and crannies of places rather than behind the altar. In the Episcopal tradition, or polity, as some people would call it, we are ordained to an altar,
mm,
a sacramental um, priesthood. And I felt called to be more out in the world, and we can do that as a deacon, but for reasons I won't get into, there felt like there was a little more freedom to be out in the nooks and crannies of the world.
mhm,
And so I am still attached to the Episcopal Church in the sense that I'm commissioned and endorsed by them as a professional chaplain with the Association of Professional Chaplains. I just say that because it's important to me to have an ecclesial link to my chaplaincy, to have some accountability to a system that's larger than myself. Or, it's part of me that loves being a free floating agent, but I don't feel like that's always a safe place if you're
mhm.
not connected to a rooted, I would call mother house. Um,
Yeah.
so I've served in a large hospital, Northside Hospital, which has the largest second largest women's center in the country.
Mm,
One of the gifts of serving there was because it was such a large women's center, they
mhm,
also had a proportionately larger number of intrauterine fetal demise. So
mm,
that was a particular area that touched me, having
sure.
been a mother myself. And then I served at the Atlanta airport as a chaplain in the interfaith ministry there. The Atlanta airport's the largest airport in the world with number of landing and takeoffs as well as number of people. There are 250,000 passengers a day that go through there.
And
Um,
I will say, moving from one hub to the other, trying to catch a flight, I could definitely use a chaplain because you can't run fast enough.
you can't. And you just hope the
Ah,
moving sidewalk and the plane trains are working.
uh,
But, that ministry called forth in me, and gave me the gift of my first, um, practical taste of spiritual inclusivity.
mhm,
So, in airport chaplaincy, you would think we would be there for the passengers, and we were, but we called the passengers the Christmas and Easter people. We called the staff the
mhm,
congregation.
yeah,
Um, so the airport, you wouldn't really think this or know it, but I can tell you from experience, trustworthy experience, that airport is filled with angels. Most of those people who are telling you which gate to go to or which line to stand in, it might look very chaotic, but
mhm,
they know what they're doing practically, but also they are faith-filled people, and so it was my
mm,
first introduction and invitation into, a Muslim population that, many practice who are employees of the airport as well as Christians, but
mhm,
many, Black Christians, who I think have a very deeply rooted faith,
mhm.
um from the land. I don't know how to articulate that,
Sure,
but
yeah,
a creation spirituality that's
yeah,
connected to land and place,
mhm,
that's deep, and that's where a lot of the spirituals come out of. So
mhm,
this sense of being invited into different spaces that I would otherwise have no access to, and it took a lot of years and a lot of trust of just saying good morning to
yeah,
be invited into those places.
wow,
Then when COVID came, I left and I went to the hospital where I serve now, which is Emory St. Joseph's Hospital, and I realized there how much I'm drawn to crisis chaplaincy. And I kind of figured that out in my contextual education portion of um, seminary, but also in clinical pastoral education, which is
yeah,
what you complete if you are going a professional chaplaincy route. And there's something about the immediacy
mhm,
of crisis chaplaincy. People tend to um, sort of drop a lot of facades. They're in an
mhm,
immediate
yeah,
crisis situation. And so it
mm,
feels very real and honest and raw to me. And that's where God I finds me
mm,
in those cracks. So my heart is actually stirred by crisis.
mhm,
Um, in a way that offers opening and opportunity for the spirit to be
mm,
present in my life, and I hope in a way that helps me offer presence to others.
yeah. That's beautiful. You mentioned about the nooks and the crannies, and I always think if we talk about, chaplaincy, keeping our finger in the cracks of humanity, that's where we always sort of dwell, and you have to be small to fit in those cracks, and I think spiritual inclusivity is tied to that type of humility. Um, but you also mentioned about the airports and all the people, and so envisioning you at the airport and all these crowds of diverse people, and then all of a sudden my mind popped to when you met us on the bridge. Can you just speak to that for a minute? I love that story.
Yes. So we have a house in South Carolina, and on the beach, and so we're back and forth, and during COVID, we were back and forth a lot more, and our Sunday school class in Atlanta had just done a deep dive into James Baldwin, and it was after George Floyd, and I just was minding my own business on the porch one morning. I was there by myself. My husband was back in Atlanta, and this sort of image in words came through, which is how many times God speaks to me, and it said, "More visual, more vocal," and I thought, "No, no." And so, I had read in the paper that morning that there was gonna be a protest march, a quiet protest march. That's not the right word, but what am I trying
Sure.
to say? A
Like peaceful
peaceful
protest.
protest,
Sure.
yes.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, I made a sign and said, in here in solidarity," and,
Mhm.
um and I had a water bottle and I needed to go throw it away. Everybody's masked up, and I'm wondering how to get through the crowd to be in the fewest germ pool possible. And I see these 5 little blue shirts, and on the back it says chaplain, and I thought, I have to go meet them." And so I walked up and I said, "You don't know me, but I think you're my people." And, you were there, Scarlett was there,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Chappie was there,
Mhm.
Amaris was there, but we started talking, and Scarlett was asking me where I served as a chaplain. I said, "The Atlanta airport." And she said, "Do you know Frank?" I was like, "Yes." Well, Frank and Scarlett had been ordained together in the Presbyterian
Wow.
church. And
Wow.
I'm sorry, there's a leaf blower outside.
That's all
In
right.
in my in my world, I call that a wink from God.
Mhm.
Like, God led me to the water bottle receptacle. I see these chaplains, then there's Scarlett, and then Scarlett knows someone that I'm presently serving with. So it just felt like this
Yeah. Yeah.
affirmation, and that's how I met you all. So then I came home and just started Googling away with, what is this organization and who's running
Oh,
it? What are their belief systems? And I was all in. So I called
that
you,
is so cool.
said, can I volunteer with you all? So yeah.
Well, we've been we've enjoyed to have you as one of our chaplains and serving alongside each other. And you've just a very special calling. And I think um, one of the things that really resonates is your sense of, as you always say, holding space for folks. And that it's just a beautiful expression of. I always think of. Was it Nathaniel? Who was under the tree? This is from my Christian faith
Zacchaeus?
tradition. Or,
Zacchaeus?
well, he was under the tree, and then he was introduced to Jesus, and Jesus said, "I saw you under the tree, and you're a true Israelite in whom there's no deceit." And then all of a sudden, he followed Jesus, and it was this sense of like being seen, like someone actually saw his deepest, inmost prayer and heart's, most authentic part of his soul, and how transformational that is for us to be seen. So when you talk about holding space, it's just such an important concept in chaplaincy. But you had mentioned a prayer, and I would love if you don't mind opening our conversation up with that prayer, and then maybe just tell us what spiritual inclusivity is to you. I'm sure there are millions of definitions, but we want to hear from Barbara. Would you open us
Yeah.
up?
This prayer came to me. It found me for this morning, and it's one that I love. And actually, many people might know it as a song, but let's open with this prayer. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Melt us, mold us, fill us, use us. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Um, I I I love that prayer's invitation to fall for God's spirit to fall afresh on us, because when we are responding to a scene, there's so much strangeness to it, and we don't know anything about the person that we are responding to or for, other than maybe the details of the call on the 911 active app.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's important that for me to remember on the way to a call out
Mhm.
to have a fresh awareness of God's presence and an awareness that I'm entering into space that I don't know anything about.
Mhm.
And so a reliance on God's presence in that place. And
Mhm.
um, one of the gifts, the greatest gifts that Coastal has uh, offered me is an utter reliance on God that I have not experienced in the same way in any other chaplaincy.
Mhm.
Because at the hospitals and at the airport, there are bricks and mortar structures in place. There are resources in place. There are chaplain colleagues in place. Oh,
Mhm.
do you know a good Muslim prayer that I could use for the person on 6 East? Or you know, do we have any prayer shawls? When you're on the side of the road, there's the crime tape. That's your boundary. And so there's this opportunity to be present in ways that feel uncomfortable because they're unfamiliar and there's so much unknown. So the importance of awareness of the freshness of God's Spirit to guide and lead us. And I
Mhm.
think that's directly related to spiritual inclusivity, how we
Mm.
can listen with open, fresh eyes to what's in front of us so that we can accompany those people to fill our mission of light and hope.
Mhm.
We don't have a mission of doctrinal conversion or trying to have someone change their theology in the middle of a crisis. We are there to be present to them in whatever way that feels life-giving to them, and
Mm.
maybe to be holding their hope for them if they're in a place where they're not able to connect with that.
Yeah.
Um, so
I
I Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it brings to mind that when we talk about, that as a preacher and a teacher in a church, our role is to sort of put God into the people, but as a chaplain, our role is to meet God in the people where God is already there, and if we're trusting that God is everywhere, then we're trying to figure out how to draw an awareness of God and to join God in the work in those nooks and crannies that you talk about.
Mhm. So
Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Um, I just wanted to name that spiritual inclusivity doesn't mean that we leave our spirituality at the door or
Mhm.
our belief system at the door. I think one of the gifts that we can offer in being spiritually inclusive is to be grounded and rooted in our own faith traditions.
Yeah.
And the more deeply we're grounded in that. So for me, trying to live like Jesus, offer what Jesus might help me
Mhm.
know to offer at this scene. So I'm not needing to let go of my own beliefs and traditions to be
Mhm.
spiritually inclusive. I'm actually trying to be as deeply rooted as possible so that
Mm.
I can, like, if you think of it as a tree, I can have my roots like an oak, a low
Yeah.
country oak. uh,
Uh-huh. Yep.
the angel oak. And so that if I'm rooted, then I'm able to open my arms and my eyes and my heart and my ears to this wider branch cover up here, to what might be going on in their lives,
Mhm.
and to be curious, not judgmental, um,
Mhm.
to not have assumptions.
Mhm.
Um, One example that's just coming to mind is there was a call, I can't remember the specifics of it, but the person I was with had on a cross. And I
Mhm.
said, "Tell me about your cross." There was a time when I would have said, "Oh, I see you're a Christian,"
Mm. Yeah.
which would be a logical
Mhm.
conclusion,
Sure.
but it
Yeah.
wasn't. And then in some of uh, the training with Coastal and my other work in CPE, the question is better held. Tell me about your cross. Well, it turns out it was just a piece of jewelry that her boyfriend's cousin gave her. I mean,
Mm.
she had no religious affiliation, but
Mm.
she liked that symbol. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I think God's working behind the scenes. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and that's an assumption, but,
Mhm.
that I kept to myself. But I think that's a good example of we can't even rely on, um, s symbols all the time as being a reliable source of
Yeah,
someone's, faith tradition. So to be curious, and I often invite someone to tell me a story. Tell me how this unfolded in your family system, or
mhm,
how have you dealt with
yeah,
grief or crisis in the past, and then to listen for what might be their systems of support to help join them where they are.
yeah. That's beautiful. I think of the kind of like the question, so I see across you're a Christian. No, there's this probably a shutdown, but tell me about your cross and then hearing about the story of the relationship and then maybe better understanding the relationship and then, deepening the understanding that we as humans are relational beings and that we need love and you just keep following these core values that people hold dear down to the source, which we as people of faith would understand the source of all depth and meaning and love and purpose as God. So it's this uh, opening of conversation that continually deepens, hopefully connecting to the source, um, as opposed to that, oh, let me put my assumption on you.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
so we were talking earlier just in prep about the contrast of a few different scenarios, so we can really delve into it. Is uh, and one of those is experiencing exclusivity. In other words, being excluded from spiritual prayer or whatever, and then inclusivity and times that they're needed. And I was just recounting being with Chaplain Boris, um, an imam, and we're at a chaplaincy event, and they begin a prayer, and I can see he's involved and entered into the prayer, and it was a wonderful prayer, and then it became more and more Christian centric, and then ended in Jesus' name and everything, and I could see him not being almost like trying really hard to stay engaged in the prayer spiritually, but then the prayer ended up excluding him. It there was no longer a way that it was almost like the prayer said, "No, from this point forward, you're not involved." And you could see him not able to, and that to me uh, really stood out. But then at the same time, maybe if you could share for a moment of the time where exclusivity as opposed to inclusivity was needed. So, like with
Yeah.
that, with multi-faith, Chaplain Boris needed an inclusivity, but there's times as the chaplain we seek exclusivity. Can you speak to that example in the hospital? That
I can. In our hospital system, we're part of a larger system, but Emory bought this Catholic hospital, and the Sisters of Mercy, who were instrumental in founding the hospital, to as a place to take care of the poor, we still have a crucifix in every room. We
Mhm,
still offer the chaplains offer an 8A and an 8P morning and evening prayer. The chapel in our hospital has a cross with
mhm,
a corpus, in stained glass. So and we still call ourselves pastoral care department. In the
mm,
larger Emory system, and then I'd be curious to know what Roper St. Francis, I think they're called spiritual health. But anyway, spiritual health is a more inclusive naming of spiritual care in
sure.
hospital or business systems. Pastoral
Mhm,
care has a Christian connotation, pastoral shepherd, Jesus
sure.
is shepherd. So that's just a little example of
Mhm,
sidebar. But often I'll get a call to say someone, wants last rites or someone
mm,
wants communion or confession. And I'll ask the nurse or whoever's calling, do you know what their faith tradition is?
mhm,
And, a lot of times they'll say Catholic. Well, I often work, on a Saturday, and Father Patrick is not there on Saturdays. He comes in on Sundays. And so often I'll get up to the floor and the person will just go, "Oh, no, I just want a prayer before my surgery," or so it really they don't need an exclusive Catholic prayer. But there are
Yeah.
also times when I get up there and they see me, I'm a woman.
Mhm.
Catholics
Yeah.
don't ordain women, so they know right away I'm not a Catholic priest. And, they're like, No, I need a priest." And so I will just say, "We have a priest on staff. He'll be here tomorrow. If it's urgent today, if you need it today, I can call him to come in." So
Yeah.
that's an example of someone needing from their own belief system, a
Mhm.
particular person who
Mhm.
is right in sync with their theology to the point
Mhm.
that my offering something would not be as deeply meaningful. Uh,
Yeah.
um, so there are times when I think it's important, and I know that with coastal, often, maybe not often, but many times, I'm so grateful when the family I'm with or the person I'm with has some connection to a faith community
Mhm.
or neighbors or an AA sponsor, whatever their local familiar system of support is, if I can be the bridge and the holding space between being present on the scene and connecting them with someone whose language is
Mhm.
more familiar to them than mine, that's the best of all scenarios. I think that's a
Mhm.
great example of being small, to get in that small
Mhm.
crack, to help find the glue that will support them
Yeah.
while I may be, on the periphery trying to hold the space,
Mhm.
to help them find a more heartfelt connection or spirit felt connection to their belief system.